Good morning and good afternoon for those that are joining us from abroad. I'm Kay Sargent and I'm the Global Director of Workplace at HOK. And for the next 25 to 30 minutes, we're going to discuss neuro-inclusion in the built environment. Now, for some, that means creating more calm and bringing a little clarity to the spaces. But for others, it actually means adding some stimulation to spaces so that they can really, truly kind of engage and kind of get that excess energy out. But for all of us, it means making spaces more functional, welcoming, and inclusive. So, for about a decade now, HOK's team has really been exploring neurodiversity, neuroinclusion, specifically in the built environment. But a few years ago, we started to kind of expand that because we believe that people need to be able to go anywhere and everywhere. And all the spaces that we're going to today are impacting us. It's estimated right now that about 15 to 20% of the population has a neurodiverse condition. And that could be whether it's autism, ADHD, Tourette's, Parkinson's, Asperger's, dyslexia. And we believe that when we can apply neuro-inclusive design elements to the built environment, then we have a better option and a better choice of really giving people some control and to be able to find the right kind of sensory stimulation or to be able to control that a little bit so that they can truly find the right setting so that they can be as functional as possible. But today, as we move this conversation forward, we're going to take it outside of the workplace and we're going to go into some of the other spaces where we all go to and travel that might be a little bit bigger, a little bit noisier, a little bit more confusing, and a little bit more stressful. So if you immediately thought of the airport, as many of us were traveling last week, gold star for you, right? That tends to be one of the ones that kind of gets everybody kind of confused and overwhelmed, or maybe even hospitals or even research environments. So I brought some friends with me today, some of my colleagues who have also been really digging into this topic in the last few years. So I want to introduce our panelists to you. So first on the list, we have the lovely Matt Needham, who is an airport designer and director of Workplace's HOK's aviation and transportation team. So, Matt, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I'm not in an airport today, which,
Yeah, I
anything
can
at
see.
the airport is probably a good day for me. All right. And then we also have Karen Freeman, who is a healthcare architect and practice leader for HOK's healthcare group. Karen, how are you?
I'm well, Kay. Great to see the team.
Great to see you as well. And again, a day that I'm not in a hospital, that's a good day for me. But Karen, we got a lot of people that are working in hospitals and healthcare settings, and we need to not only think about the patients but them too. So glad that you're with us today. And then we have Damon Shepard, who is an architect specializing in research and higher education, and is the regional leader of HOK's science and technology practice. So, Damon, how are you this morning?
I am awesome, Kay.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us to get today on this lovely conversation. And Matt, since we were just talking about airports and traveling, and since last week was probably one of the busiest travel days of the week, let's start with you. And let's start with airports. And really kind of tell us how your team is thinking about how do we design airports to be, whether it's less confusing, less stressful, or really making it a better experience, not just for people that are neurodivergent, but for everyone.
Now, great, timely, right? Hope everyone had a fun travel, hopefully a safe and enjoyable travel. Maybe not, though. Yeah, Kate, a lot of stress at airports, especially in busy times. What we're trying to do is to really address some neuro-inclusion design elements to help ease some of that stress. And the stress can be in the ticketing, where do I drop my bag, security,
Yeah.
that line's long, it could be recompose, it could be once you get through, where's my gate? Or if you're transferring, where's my gate, where's my gate, where's my gate? So, a lot of airports are doing right now, they're trying to address this through multi-sensory rooms,
Yeah.
which are typically kind of located in a back corner of an airport, so that in some way, you need to find it.
It's a
Um,
challenge to get there in the first place, right? You get a
it is,
start, you can actually find it.
yeah, and so they're helpful, I think, for some targeted populations, right? Targeted folks. For example, maybe you've got a kid who's afraid of flying, and that might be, you build in time in your schedule to go there and help. kind of alleviate some of that stress and then get on and hopefully have a great time. But I think that is not kind of where we really want to go. Our team is trying to really integrate some of these design elements into the entire customer journey,
Yeah.
where those stress points are, right? Ticketing, security, post security. Where do you go? So that means really kind of providing a range of design elements to accommodate the wide range of neurodiverse peoples, right? So acoustics is huge.
Mhm.
Light space, large spaces, maybe some small spaces. So having each of these choices along the path, if you will, the path of
Yeah.
travel, and allow folks to kind of find their way, and hopefully they won't even know that they're actually their journey is being better because of this design
Yeah. So I love the fact that you're
design.
talking about that good design isn't necessarily a destination, it's an entire journey. And so when we
Yeah,
think about this, it really starts before you even arrive at the airport, right? And just preparing you for what you might encounter, helping people streamline through security, giving them more opportunities just to kind of get out of that chaotic mode that often
yeah,
is in airports. And Matt, one of my favorite conversations that you and I have ever had with one of our clients is we were talking about the design of a multisensory room, and they said, yeah, well, it's always getting repurposed
yeah,
anyway. I mean, the pilots and the TSA guys are always going in there and hanging out, and they're misusing it. And we said, well, did you ever think that maybe they're neurodivergent and they need like a
yeah.
place to go to that's less stressful for them? And it was kind of like that aha moment that they realized this is impacting far more people in society than I think we normally think
Right.
about. Yeah. So, Karen, healthcare workers, if you want to talk about a group of individuals that have been through
Yeah.
an amazing amount of stress over the last 3 years and really need our support, and the patients and the families that are going to these environments, how are you all designing spaces from a healthcare environment to really be more welcoming and inclusive for everyone?
Yeah, Kay, it's definitely a challenge to all of our healthcare workers, and the spaces that they're in we have such limited control over. I'm pleased to say that we've really been focused on the patient experience and the family experience from a neurodiversity perspective for quite some time now, using a lot of the research that you and your team have been doing to help guide us. But what we haven't been doing until recently, and I'm excited that we're now embarking on, is really looking at it as a workplace for our healthcare team. And in particular, given the stressors that they have, given the limited staff that is available right now, especially coming out of the pandemic, we know that all of our healthcare systems are facing massive staffing
Yeah.
challenges. All the more reason we should be focusing on this. And so, where can we provide access to natural light? How can we ensure that staff spaces have access to the outdoors that are close to the unit? How can we look at lighting in different ways to lessen the impact to the circadian rhythm that a lot of our lighting challenges? So, lots of great opportunities here, I think, to start really thinking about the healthcare workplace and ensuring that those highly valuable employees have the critical skills that we need to provide the best possible patient care, can do that in an environment that is inclusive to their needs.
Yeah, and Karen, look, you've got kind of conflicting needs, right? Because you got the healthcare workers that need things to be very intuitive, very simple. You're trying to reduce the number of steps that they're taking. You've got the families that you're trying to make it a more calm and pleasant experience. Wayfinding in a hospital can be really challenging for people that are coming there for the first time ever. But then you also have a whole group of individuals that are coming there every single day. And I think one of the things I love about having conversations with you and your team is that the healthcare practice and sector really has embraced evidence-based design probably far earlier than almost anyone else. And really, you guys have some great information about, the effects of biophilia and natural daylight and how that really impacts us. So I love the fact that we can collaborate and kind of share lessons learned from different sectors. Okay, Damon. So we're gonna pull you into this too because you are dealing with a lot of individuals that are in kind of set environments, whether it's an academic environment or if it's in a laboratory. And they have to be clean rooms often. They have to be sterile. Kind of void of any things. People are sitting for long periods of time, kind of in an environment. How are you all rethinking how you're designing those facilities to really kind of meet the needs of everyone, not just hypersensitive, but hyposensitive, and giving some people a break from just that monotonous environment that they might find themselves in.
So, what's interesting is that historically, we've designed laboratory environments really focused on being efficient, right? Focusing on equipment, casework, and workflows, and trying to optimize that in support of the research. But what we've started to do is challenge that a bit. While those things are critical and those are the mission, it's also important to think about the researcher as much as we think about the research.
Yeah.
And we've had a tremendous focus over the past several years to really try to humanize the lab and focus on the people as much as we do the actual equipment and research. So there are a couple of things that are fairly easy to do in a laboratory environment because we all know that labs can have a lot of requirements and restrictions that might preclude us from doing some of the things we could do in a workplace environment. But a couple of things that we've really been intensely focusing on are first, introducing as much natural daylight as we can into those lab environments. Right? Our lab workers are in these labs for several hours a day,
Yeah.
oftentimes, and where we have the opportunity to locate those labs along an exterior wall, that's fantastic. When we can't do that, there's also opportunities to bring borrowed light in from adjacent perimeter spaces to really start to give those lab users connection to the exterior. So that's a level of biophilia that we can create even within the laboratory environment. In fact, in recent years, we've started to evaluate locating vivaria on upper floors. Historically, those have been kind of basement facilities. But through locating it on upper floors, it accomplishes two things. One, from a resiliency standpoint, it's fantastic. If you've got a flood or you've got some sort of a subsurface issue, you don't destroy all the research that's happening. In
Yeah.
addition, the people that are in that vivarium environment now can also benefit from the daylight by having it above grade. The other thing that's a pretty straightforward thing to do that we like to emphasize is ergonomics, right? So, choice of flooring, for example, depending on the type of lab and the type of science that's happening in it, maybe you can go with something like a rubber flooring. So, it's softer, it's going to be more comfortable for lab workers that are standing for hours, and even looking at the furniture, the lab stools, making sure they have backs. Basic things to just improve human comfort while they're in in the lab environment are really critical to making it a more inclusive space.
Yeah, and Damon, one of the things I love that your team really is kind of focusing on is, for the individuals that do have to be at a fixed lab bench for an extended period of time, giving them kind of a respite. So when they go
Mhm.
outside of that lab, having spaces nearby that allow, a very different type of experience, maybe a more casual setting,
Yeah.
spaces that they can socialize a little bit more, maybe a little bit more colorful, things that you can't necessarily have in the labs. But if you can provide access to that more easily and immediately adjacent to that, it gives a little bit of that relief. And Karen, I have to believe that that's something that you guys are dealing with in healthcare as well. Is you have to have certain environments that are very sterile, but the amenities and the services that we provide adjacent to that can really help balance that out. So can you two just talk about that real quickly as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely communication is key in the healthcare environment. We've got folks who are conveying information that can be life or death, and our ability for our team to process that information, to hear it well, to understand it and act on it immediately is critical. And so having those spaces where they can decompress for just a few moments, if that's all they've got, quite close to the unit are incredibly important. We can't have them traversing to the far side of the hospital to get to the only roof terrace or the only garden or the only outdoor space. That really needs to be adjacent to their work area and part of their workflow for it to be used successfully.
Yeah, and Damon, you talked a little bit about,
Yeah.
human-centric design, really thinking about it from their perspective, which, sometimes all the other requirements kind of took over,
Mhm.
and that was the last thing that we talked about. So love that you really talked about that. Okay, I'm going to make a statement that hopefully all of you, I think, will agree with, but we believe really, really strongly in the power of spaces and the fact that when we design spaces well, they can be really positive aspects for people that are working there, for people that are visiting, in any of those cases. And when we started our research, probably around 7 years ago, The numbers were saying that it was about 1 in 8 individuals was considered to be neurodivergent. Now that number is closer to 1 in 5. And we actually think it might end up being closer to 1 in 3 when all is said and done, just because the stigmatism is wearing off. 70% of disabilities are invisible, and so it's not as obvious. And there's a heightened awareness that's coming. But we still get some interesting questions from our clients. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a little bit here because we've all had these conversations, Matt, you and I, very recently with a client who said, yeah, we don't need to talk about that. We're not impacted by that at all. Like we don't have anybody that fits that category here. So how do you all help clients understand how important of a topic this really is and why they should be addressing it? So, Matt, we literally just had that conversation recently. So, share a little bit if you could.
We did, and that conversation was not atypical, Kay. So
Yeah.
so I think the entire industry is really interested in providing a better experience for their customers. In this case, for airports, it's the passengers, right? And so you've seen a lot of new amenities happening and occurring. There's indoor, there's kind of parklets, if you will. There's
Yep.
indoor outdoor spaces, a lot more lounges. Lounge access is a big deal. Um, and so, just piggybacking onto that with our clients and just kind of saying, well, that's great to provide some of these amenities. I think where the traction really gets to be positive is when you start to talk about humanizing, like Damon used that word too, right?
Yeah.
Human-centered design, where you can start to really process these elements and discuss them in a way that improves customer experience. And then in our world, our clients understand that a happy customer also spends a little bit more money post security and the concessions, and that's direct to the bottom line. So that sell is not very difficult once you make that connection.
Right. And I think that, part of that aha moment for that client when we said maybe the pilots and the TSA agents are neurodivergent, this is not about a population that you might have in the future. This is about the population you already have, but you just may not necessarily be aware of. So, Karen, want to flip to you on that. How are you having these conversations with your clients and helping them realize? I think the great mantra in the firm also is, when you design for the extreme, you benefit the mean, meaning this isn't just for people that are neurodivergent. We are all neurodiverse and process information differently. And you don't have to be on the extreme ends of those spectrums to be impacted by that sensory assault that is coming at us. And I can't imagine more of a sensory assault than being in a hospital setting and in a healthcare setting, just with everything coming at you. So, how are you having those conversations with your clients to help them realize this is important?
Well, I think we're fortunate in the healthcare industry that because of the nursing shortages that everyone is seeing since the pandemic started and the increase in nursing and staff costs that our healthcare providers are seeing, upwards of 45% increase in costs over the last 4 or 5 years. Recruitment and retention of key staff is a really important thing to our health clients. And so they too are looking for these strategies to better engage with their workforce, to increase their satisfaction level, to give them the most supportive environment they can, because they realize that ultimately this affects their bottom line. So we're fortunate that we have clients on the side of that. I think we're also sort of reframing it as not so much looking at the disabilities, but looking at those critical capabilities that our neurodivergent and neurotypical staff members have that we can support with a more inclusive environment. Things that we associate with neurodivergent diagnosis like hyperfixation, attention to detail. These are all things that we would love to see our clinical staff do and characteristics that we would love to have them to have. So these are highly valuable employees and work members that we would love to support with a more inclusive workspace.
So I love that you said that because people that are neurodivergent often have, whether they tend to be out of the box thinkers, they tend to see patterns where other people don't see patterns, they tend to have that hyper focus, all of which not only is important in healthcare, but Damon, when you're doing research and you're trying to discover those things, there's a lot of discussions about there might be a lot of people that kind of navigate to certain professions because they can leverage their skill set there. So I have to believe that that is absolutely probably the case in science and technology. So what kind of conversations are you having with your clients to help them realize this is an important topic to be discussing?
Absolutely. So the science and technology industry is an extraordinarily competitive industry. I mean, in the war for talent, the best researchers, the best faculty is intense. So I think both our corporate and higher education clients do understand that, and they realize that the lab only represents a portion of the scientific workplace. Those researchers, those faculty members are going to spend a good amount of their time outside of that lab environment. And Kay, you alluded to it earlier, but we really need to think about the research environment as a whole, as an ecosystem, not just a laboratory. But much of the research and discovery that happens through collaboration, happens in the kind of meeting spaces, in the kind of amenity spaces that are really focused on bringing different groups and different researchers together. So I think that we can really learn from some of the great work that our workplace team has done and start to leverage that when we do expand outside of the laboratory environment, looking for places that both accommodate kind of a quiet, focused environment, but then also those places that are really about congregation and a bit more robust collaboration. Also using opportunities to incorporate different types of textures, colors, things that may be more challenging in the lab environment can often be leveraged once you get outside of that, because
Yeah.
quite frankly, sometimes half of the space you're designing is not a lab.
Yeah, I love that, and I want to talk a little bit because we have a great question from the audience, just about what are some of the design attributes. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you because you're the living example. You're sitting there in a room, being very still and quiet. Of course, the light, our sustainable factors kicked in, and the lights went out on you, so you had to start waving your arms. But you think about healthcare environments, the reality of live, being on LinkedIn Live, you got to love it. Um, but in healthcare environments, you have a lot of really harsh lighting or big footprints that don't necessarily get natural daylight. Can you talk a little bit, just real simple, maybe one or two quick lighting strategies that you guys are using? And then, Damon, I'm going to ask you about some acoustic strategies you guys might be thinking about. And Matt, I'm going to talk to you about some biophilic elements. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you since you're having light challenges right now and probably are going to have to start flapping your arms again soon to keep the lights on.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have a lot more flexibility with our lighting systems these days.
Yeah.
The innovation and technology behind lighting systems is much more advanced, and we can really focus on lighting that is supportive of a circadian rhythm, that illuminates the area that we specifically need to focus upon, and for those third shift workers in particular, doesn't disrupt them too much.
Mm.
So I think that's a critical part. And then as design professionals and focused on planning and designing the built environment, I think it's our responsibility to look for opportunities to either use shared light or access to natural lights on a regular interval. And this comes back to that wayfinding strategy that you were talking about in the beginning, and making that as intuitive as possible. And one key element to do that is to have this point of reflection or this point of acknowledgement to the exterior, so that we can orient people intuitively to where they are. There's nothing worse than being in a hospital that's just a maze of corridors. You have
Yeah.
no idea where you are. It's adding to the stress of the situation. And that's the same for our workers as well. So if
Well,
we
and
can,
I love that you use that example, Karen, right? Because one of the things I will say, if anybody says, "Oh, we don't think design has an impact," if you walk into an environment and there's a narrow corridor that's dark to the right, but a wider corridor to the left that's bright, 90 some percent of the people will walk to the left, they'll walk towards the light to the wider. So those design elements, and lighting is a huge one, really can impact, how we're doing that. Okay, Damon, anything about acoustics? Because that's a huge topic today.
Yeah, and acoustics can be tricky in a lab, right? Because you can't necessarily use all of the absorptive materials that you might want to use
Right.
in a non-lab environment. So what we really have to think about is the balance, right? Because there are some labs that are really equipment intensive, and that equipment does generate a lot of noise. So how we plan that lab to provide spaces not only for the equipment, but spaces that are remote from that, where conversations can happen away from the equipment, where the acoustic levels can be reduced. Again, providing those spaces for respite outside of the lab are going to be important. And even using assistive listening technology sometimes when lab workers may be trying to focus, it allows them to kind of reduce some of the background noise that they may be experiencing from equipment while they focus on other tasks. So it's something that's a constant balancing act, and we find different levels of opportunity depending on the science that's happening. But it's
Right.
something that's always at the forefront of how we evaluate lab design.
I love it. And Matt, you design these huge airports that are surrounded by runways. How do you bring natural elements into
Yeah,
these spaces to
yeah.
make them more human centric?
Well, the trend I think started in lounges where there were plants and water features that really started to kind of speak to their customer satisfaction, if you will. But we've been taking those elements and really applying them again along the path of travel is the best place. Because plants and like an indoor outdoor parklet, outdoor decks, um, they're really de-stressing, particularly if you're going to be boarding an aircraft, which is essentially going to be what, an aluminum pressurized tube for several hours, right? You
Yes,
want to have access to
basically.
wind and natural daylight on your face. It's just relaxing. So that helps alleviate the some of that stress, and we try to apply that strategically where we can.
Well, and I also know that we have lots of conversations around with Sean Quinn, who is regenerative design focused, that biophilic is not just a plant in the corner. In fact, it's biomorphic environments, it's shapes, it's materiality, it's all of those other things that really can kind of create great environments. Okay, real quick speed round. Where do you think we're going? Like, what's next? What are you guys focused on? Matt, I'm going to start with you. Just one quick thing.
Acoustics. Airports are critical for acoustics. You need to hear the announcements, yet you really need to actually de-stress through that process. So that is a major focus.
Okay, Damon.
I'm super interested to understand the impact that things like automation, lab automation, machine learning are going to have on the lab environment and how it might change the balance of space use, right? Does that efficiency mean more activities happen outside the lab because those labs don't need to be as large and the lab users aren't spending as much time in the lab? So I'm watching that space to see how that evolves and how it
Right.
affects the
Could there
lab.
be a new renaissance where we can
Yeah,
focus on higher return things
yeah,
that are more not as simple as just
exactly.
executing, but we can like really kind of leverage what we do best. Karen, what do you think? What's next? What's coming forward?
Yeah, I'm excited about exploring more opportunities for communication between our healthcare work staff and our patients. That is a critical point that we're trying to achieve in all of our built environment is an effective communication between those two. So whether it's verbal or visual, how can the built environment support that and create a really strong dialogue between patient and provider?
Yeah, and I'm going to chime in here, and I'm going to say what I'm really excited about is that we are doing two pilots right now, one in San Francisco, one in London. The results are going to be coming out really, really shortly. So watch the space, watchhok.com. We're going to be sharing kind of our findings about what's really impacting people in the built environment and how we can do that. And I want to end, first of all, by thanking the three of you for bringing your expertise to this conversation, but also just kind of reiterate, I think, what we believe really strongly as a firm is that design can be a powerful force in helping to create more inclusive environments. But it's one of what we would call the three-legged stool, right? We need to make sure that we're onboarding, we have the operational procedures and the guidelines, the HR, and we are not HR specialists. We know we got design all day long, but we partner with great people who really understand those policies and procedures and can help onboard and train people. But then you have to create an environment that is supportive of them because otherwise, it's not going to function. And even if you onboard everybody and create an amazing environment, you still have to empower people with some kind of individual options and choices because one size misfits all. And if you know one person that is autistic, you've met one person that is autistic or neurodivergent. There's so many different parameters, but we truly do believe that this is an important topic. We're going to continue to do more research on this. We're going to continue to bring that forward for all of you. And we're going to expand it. We're expanding it into our sports team. We're expanding it into justice, all of those different sectors that are so important. So thank you all for joining us today for this conversation. Matt, Karen, Damon, always love hearing your perspectives and what you are doing. I'm so inspired by what you all are doing in your practices. Keep up the great work, and we will continue this conversation in, wow, 2024. We're almost there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Kay. Thanks, team.